The moment lingered like a bruise. Imani standing alone in the hallway, staring at the prom poster, just as two girls passed behind her and whispered with a laugh, "That crown's never gonna fit her curls." She didn't turn around. She didn't flinch, but something inside her cracked. Willowdale High had never been an outright cruel place, just a place where lines were drawn in invisible ink. It was the kind of school where diversity brochures featured students of color smiling on the front. Yet inside those very halls, expectations lived inside a narrow box. For years, Imani Brooks had stayed quiet inside that box, kind, respectful, and careful not to stir waters that were never built for her reflection. 17 years old, with dreams of Howard University and a heart stitched from theater scripts and Sunday sermons, Imani walked through Willowdale's polished corridors, knowing how to survive. She knew how to smile through microaggressions, how to answer questions like she spoke for her whole race, and how to wear confidence like armor on days when even teachers mispronounced her name. But when prom season arrived, something shifted. The posters started popping up the week after spring break. Bright colors, sparkling letters, and big promises. Prom 2024, a night to shine. Layla, her best friend since 8th grade, nudged her at lunch while chewing a carrot stick and said, "You should run. You'd be an amazing prom queen." Imani laughed, brushing the suggestion off like lint. She had never seen anyone who looked like her wear that crown. Not in this town. Not at Willowdale. Prom queen was always a specific type. Blonde, polished, and predictable. A role made for someone like Chloe Hartwell, not a girl with natural curls and a loud laugh and skin the color of strength. Still, the idea followed her. It followed her into classes, into the theater room, into the bathroom mirror. She thought about what it meant to take up space in a school that only clapped for her when she played someone else on stage. What would it mean to be seen, not as a supporting act, but as the girl center stage, crown and all? That night, over. Dinner, she brought it up. Her mother raised an eyebrow, setting down her fork. "Why not?" she asked gently. Imani shrugged. "Because they already think I don't belong. They'd laugh, Mom. I heard them today." Her mother looked at her, voice steady. "Let them laugh. You don't need their permission to be worthy. You've been a queen long before they had a crown to give." The words wrapped around her like a hug she didn't know she needed. That night, Imani wrote her name on the application form. Her hands trembled as she folded the paper, but her chest felt lighter. The next morning she turned it in. Whispers started almost immediately. Some curious, some mocking. Chloe's campaign was already underway. Professional photos, color-coordinated. Flyers and teachers casually slipping her name into conversations about school spirit. Imani's announcement came with silence, not because people didn't hear, but because they didn't believe. She walked past a group near the vending machines and caught them mid-conversation. "She's only doing it for attention," one said. "She doesn't even fit the vibe," another added. "I mean, come on, it's not like she's prom queen material." The words stung in ways she didn't expect. Not because she believed them, but because they echoed things she had been trained to ignore all her life. At home, she tried to focus on schoolwork, but the noise from school clung to her. Her little brother, Malik, peeked into her room with wide eyes and said, "I hope you win. You looked like a queen in your school play." She smiled at him, fighting back tears. That small voice reminded her why she had to keep going. It wasn't just for her. It was for every little black girl in that school who needed to see something different. So she printed out posters, simple ones. Her in a blue dress, smiling, her natural hair framed like a halo. The words read, "A queen for all." By the next day, 2 were already defaced. One torn, one scribbled over in black marker. No one said anything, not even the teachers who walked past them. She didn't cry. She didn't even bring it up. But she went home and made 5 more. Layla helped her hang them up again. "If they're gonna keep tearing them down," she said, "then we're gonna keep putting them back up." Each step forward felt like walking through mud, but she kept walking. The official list of candidates was announced over the loudspeakers. There was a pause after her name. Just a second too long. It didn't seem intentional, but it was enough to make some students glance around and chuckle. She held her head high, even when her stomach turned. And that's when it happened. The moment that would brand itself into her memory. She was standing in the main hall near the front office when the two girls passed behind her, giggling under their breath, not caring who heard. That crown's never gonna fit her curls. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared ahead, eyes on the same poster that had inspired all of this. She could have walked away, but instead she whispered to herself, just loud enough to believe it. I wasn't made to fit their crown. I'll show them how a real one's worn. And from that moment forward, the fight wasn't just about prom. It was about pride, about taking up space, about refusing to shrink. They had made it clear they never meant that crown for her, but that didn't mean she wouldn't rise up and take it anyway. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at school grew heavier. Imani noticed how conversations paused when she walked by, how even some teachers hesitated to mention her name. The silence wasn't neutral, it was loaded. Her presence in the prom race wasn't seen as brave, it was seen as disruptive. Still, she persisted. She spent late nights refining her message. This wasn't about popularity, it was about possibility. She wanted students to see that leadership didn't have to come dressed in the expected. That confidence wasn't about who clapped the loudest for you, but about standing tall when no one did. At lunch, she started sitting at different tables, talking to freshmen, theater kids, even a few of Chloe's old friends. Some listened, a few nodded, others stayed quiet. But one girl, a sophomore named Raina, leaned in and said, I never thought someone like us could try that. Imani smiled, soft but sure. That's why I'm trying. The simple exchange reminded her of something her grandmother used to. Juyu, you don't light a candle just for yourself. You light it so others can find the way, too. The next week, she was invited to speak during the morning announcements, a chance each candidate was given. Chloe's speech had been polished and poised. Imani's was different. She spoke from her heart. She talked about representation, courage, and what it meant to be seen, not as a token, but as a whole person. When she finished, the room was quiet. Not everyone clapped, but some did. Enough for her to know that the silence was beginning to break. Each small win mattered, each painful moment carved something new inside her. She no longer hoped to fit into a crown. She was building one from scratch. The morning after Imani posted her candidacy announcement on social media, her phone buzzed with likes, a few heart emojis, and several messages from classmates. Some were encouraging, others were blank. No words, just the awkward silence of people who saw her post and kept scrolling. But what she didn't expect was what greeted her at school. It started with whispers at her locker, not loud enough to confront but pointed enough to feel. The kind that follow you like shadows. Imani tried to brush it off. She had rehearsed her smile in the mirror that morning. She wore her favorite denim jacket, pressed her curls with extra care. She walked, in believing she had the right to be seen, to be heard, to belong. But by third period, the hallways told her otherwise. Near the student center, where students gathered during breaks, her campaign posters had been torn from the walls. The ones left behind were scribbled over with crude drawings. Her face sketched with exaggerated lips, her nose enlarged and circled. On one, someone had written in red marker, "Not our queen." Another simply said, "No chance." Her breath caught. For a moment, it was hard to move. Students passed by, some pretending not to see, others smirking, and a few whispering behind. Cupped hands. Imani stood frozen, her heartbeat thudding so loud it drowned out the noise around her. She didn't cry, not yet. Instead, she stared at her own face twisted in hatred and wondered how something so ugly could happen so quickly. She peeled the posters down quietly. No one helped, not even the students who had once smiled at her in the hallways. Even her teachers passed by with tight expressions, eyes flicking away like it wasn't theirs to fix. By lunchtime, the whole school knew, and yet nothing was said over the loudspeakers. No announcement, no condemnation, Just the usual reminders about library hours and late bus sign-ups. Imani sat in the cafeteria with Layla, who was fuming, practically shaking with rage. "You're telling me no one's going to do anything?" Layla had asked when they'd gone to the office to report it. The secretary had offered a forced smile and said, "We'll look into it. Sometimes students take things a little too far during election season. Try not to take it personally. Try not to take it personally." It echoed in Imani's ears as she stared down at her untouched lunch. She wasn't even sure what she felt: shame, confusion, disbelief. It wasn't just the vandalism that stung, it was the silence around it. The refusal to name what had happened, to treat it like anything more than a prank. But it wasn't a prank, it was a message. One delivered with red marker and racial caricatures, and the kind of casual cruelty that made you question your place in the world. Later that day, in history class, Chloe Hartwell took her usual seat at the front of the room. Everything about her was polished. She laughed easily, spoke confidently, and seemed to float through life on an invisible cushion of privilege. When the teacher asked for volunteers to present their essays, Chloe's hand shot up. Imani watched her, studied her. There was something too smooth in the way she turned her head to glance back at Imani. Like she knew something, like she enjoyed being one step ahead. Chloe never said anything directly. She didn't need to. Her presence did all the speaking. She was the kind of girl Willowdale adored, safe, shiny, familiar. The school had crowned her long before the ballots even opened. When the bell rang, Chloe walked past Imani, brushing shoulders just slightly. She smiled, small, sweet. "Rehearsed. Sorry about the posters," she said, voice as light as air. "Kids can be so immature." Imani stared at her, but Chloe had already turned the corner, her blonde hair swinging behind her like punctuation. The tears didn't come until later. At home, Imani pulled her hoodie over her head, trying to disappear, into herself. She tossed her backpack on the floor, slumped into bed, and let the ache rise. Her mother was still at work, and the house was quiet except for the creak of the old ceiling fan and the distant sound of her little brother's cartoons. Malik came into her room just after sunset. He was holding a drawing, stick figures of their family holding hands. His brow furrowed when he saw her face. "Did someone make you sad?" he asked softly. She didn't answer. "Is it 'cause of the Queen thing?" he continued. "Why don't they like your face?" The question hit her like a wave. Imani couldn't find the words. "'Cause how do you explain to an 8-year-old that the world sometimes doesn't care how good you are, how kind, how smart, because all they see is the color of your skin?" She pulled him close, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "It's not you, okay? Don't ever think it's about you." He nodded, trusting her, but she didn't trust herself anymore. That night, she sat with her mom in the kitchen after dinner, her fingers trailing the rim of a chipped teacup. "I think I'm done," she said quietly. "With the race, it's not worth it." Her mom looked up from the sink, drying her hands on a towel. "They hurt you," she said. Imani nodded. "They don't even see me. They see some joke, some mistake." There was a pause. "Then make them see you," her mother replied gently. "You can't let people with no vision decide your worth." But no one did anything, Imani said. Even the school. They acted like it wasn't that serious. Her mother sat beside her. "That's how they keep people like you quiet. They don't scream in your face, they whisper behind your back and wait for you to step down." Imani swallowed hard. Her mother's words were soft, but they cut deep. "Don't know if I'm strong enough," she admitted. "You're already stronger than you think," her mother said. "But only you can decide what you're fighting for." Imani stared at her hands. She had never felt so small, so exposed. And yet, under all the hurt, something flickered. A tiny spark. It wasn't rage, it wasn't pride. It was something quieter, an ache for something better. She hadn't made her final decision yet. But as she stood from the table and turned toward her room, the weight of the day still pressed on her. But it was no longer unbearable. It had form now. It had shape. And she was beginning to see it for what it was. Not just cruelty, but a challenge. Tomorrow, she would have to choose, step back or step forward. Below is the full script for the section Internal Conflict and Isolation, The Mirror That Lies. The script is written in a dramatic, emotional, and inspiring tone, with a focus on Imani's internal journey, incorporating dialogue, vivid descriptions, and moments of deep introspection. The text is approximately 2,000 words. Imani's days at Willowdale became a quiet battle against herself. Mornings that used to begin with an eager anticipation of life now dawned with a heavy cloud of doubt. Each step she took through the hallways felt measured and cautious. The vibrant, confident Imani that once filled every classroom had slowly been replaced by a girl who whispered to herself between classes, barely daring to look up. After the painful defacement of her campaign posters and the crushing silence that followed, Imani found that even her own reflection seemed to question her worth. At first, she tried to bury the hurt in busy schedules, attending more club meetings, rehearsing lines for the theater production, and even engaging in group studies. But slowly, those activities lost their spark. It was as if every time she looked in the mirror, she saw not the shining possibility of a future queen, but a battered soul trying to mend fractures within. One afternoon, Imani stood before her, small, dented mirror in her bedroom, the one that showed every trace of exhaustion on her face. She raised a trembling hand to her hair. Her natural curls, once a wild crown of beauty, now appeared as a tangled mess that she wasn't sure how to fix. With a deep breath, she reached for her flat iron, a tool that, in her heart, symbolized the pressure to conform. The moment was heavy with self-doubt. For a long while, she stared at her reflection, watching as her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. The familiar mantra echoed in her mind. You have to look a certain way to be seen. Halfway through straightening a lock of hair, her hand paused. Imani's breath hitched. In that silent pause, she saw all the years of exclusion, the painful flashbacks of being the only black girl in ballet class, the sneers when her teachers mispronounced her name, and the quiet looks that told her she didn't belong. Slowly, she let her fingers fall, deciding instead to let her natural curls fall free. I am enough, she whispered, though even those words barely reached her ears. The mirror offered no comfort, only raw, honest reflection of her inner turmoil. The next day brought memories she had long tried to forget. In the library, as she perused a book on famous civil rights figures, she heard hushed voices from behind a row of shelves. Isn't she trying too hard? A voice remarked softly. The comment, though barely audible, stung like a shard of glass. Her classmates, white and black alike, seemed to have retreated into their own safe spaces, leaving her isolated in the crowded corridors. Even her longtime friends, who used to laugh with her and share secrets during lunch, now appeared distant, reluctant to engage in any conversation that might demand taking a stand. In a moment of quiet resignation, Imani deleted her campaign page on social media. Each deletion felt like erasing a part of herself, a piece of the hope that someone would dare to cast their vote for change. But with every keystroke, the weight of the silent world around her grew heavier. She stopped joining school clubs that she loved. The theater group, which had once been her escape, no longer felt safe. When the invitation to rehearsals came, she hesitated, then chose to withdraw, afraid that every public step she took might be met with judgment or, worse, rejection. Late one evening, while sitting alone at her desk with the only light coming from a small desk lamp, Imani's thoughts drifted to memories of her childhood. She remembered the day when she first stepped into a ballet class. The room had been filled with girls who shared a similar look, while she stood out with her braids and her unmistakable skin tone. The teacher had struggled over her name, calling her Monique instead of Imani, even after she corrected the mistake. That was when she first understood the sting of being different, a lesson hammered into her young heart. The recollection made her chest tighten, and she buried her face in her hands, wishing she could disappear into the background. It wasn't long before her isolation seeped into every corner of her life. In class, she made fewer comments, spoke less in group discussions, and even her smile, which had once lit up a room, now faltered at the edges. Imani felt the pressure of being both visible and invisible. Visible enough to be noticed, but invisible enough so that her pain was never acknowledged. The voices of her white friends were now hushed when she entered the room, and even her black peers offered only sympathetic glances without words. During one particularly quiet lunch period, Imani sat by herself near a window, watching as the rain began to fall outside. The droplets on the glass blurred the world beyond, much like the blurred lines of her own self-image. She recalled a conversation with a classmate from a year ago, a time when her dreams were still vibrant. A fellow student had said, "You're so strong, Imani, you light up the room even when it's dark." But now, that light felt dimmed, almost swallowed by the darkness that followed every whispered remark and every sideways glance. The stillness was finally broken when a familiar, comforting voice called her name. It was Mama Ruth, her grandmother, who had always known when something was amiss. That evening, after school had ended and the house lay quiet, Mama Ruth visited. In the warmth of the modest kitchen, the aroma of simmering soup mingled with the soft lamplight, and Imani finally allowed herself to speak. With tear-filled eyes, she recounted the loneliness, the harsh judgments, and the constant sense of falling short. Mama Ruth listened with unwavering attention, her own eyes glistening with memories of a past that was both painful and proud. "Imani," she said, her tone firm yet tender, "I marched with Dr. King. I stood with people who believed in justice even when it cost them everything. And you, my dear, are part of that same legacy. Dignity isn't given, it's claimed. You need to see yourself as the queen you truly are, regardless of what this world, no matter how mean, wants you to believe." Her grandmother's words settled over her like a blanket. "I know it hurts," Mama Ruth continued, "but every time they try to take away your shine, remember that it is yours to hold. You are not defined by their silence or their cruelty, but by your own truth." That night, as Imani lay in bed, Mama Ruth's voice echoed in her mind. The memory of her grandmother's resilience glowed in every word. In the stillness, she began to wonder if, perhaps, this isolation was not the end, but a necessary part of her transformation. Maybe, just maybe, the mirror that she now dreaded was instead showing her exactly what she needed to become. A fighter, a leader, someone who would not be silenced by a society too scared to look. The following days, however, brought more reminders of the harshness of her reality. Chloe's campaign continued to gain momentum. Glossy posters of Chloe, with her perfected smile and carefully arranged hair, adorned the hallways. The professional video of Chloe's campaign played repeatedly, on every digital screen in the school, drowning out Imani's once bright campaign with polished perfection. Teachers praised Chloe in passing remarks, and students compared notes on her every move. Meanwhile, Imani's voice became more subdued, her face slipping further into the background. The vibrant colors of her campaign were reduced to distant memories, a recollection of what might have been. At lunch, Imani's close friend Layla finally broke the silence. "I'm worried about you, Imani. You used to laugh louder, talk more. It's like you're erasing yourself." Her tone was gentle, laced with genuine concern and helpless frustration. Imani looked up, her eyes reflecting the weight of every unspoken word. "Maybe I'm just tired, Layla. Tired of fighting battles that aren't mine to fight alone." Her voice wavered, the admission laden with hopelessness. Layla reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You are not alone in this. You deserve to be seen, and we all deserve to see you shine. Don't let them make you think you're invisible." But even as Layla's words tried to pierce the veil of isolation, Imani felt the pull of her doubts like a tide. Memories of childhood reemerged, of the time she sat quietly while others decided her fate, of being singled out for simply being different. In the quiet moments between classes, she recalled teachers mispronouncing her name, the hurt in her eyes when her classmates laughed, and how her own reflection seemed to mock her efforts. The mirror was no longer a friend. It had become a relentless critic. That evening, Imani found herself once again before the mirror in her room. The events of the day played out in her mind as she gazed into her own eyes. She decided to confront the reflection, to challenge the face that seemed so burdened by the weight of expectations. Slowly, she reached out and touched the mirror as if to steady herself. "I see you," she said softly. "I know the pain and the beauty that lies within, and I promise I will not let the darkness win." In that moment of quiet defiance, Imani felt a spark ignite, tiny but fierce. It was the memory of Mama Ruth's gentle strength, the echo of every kind word from friends, and the buried belief that she could reclaim her dignity. With a newfound resolve, she resolved that she would not let the isolation define her. Even if the world around her chose to forget, she would remember who she was. Over the coming weeks, Imani's journey was not marked by grand declarations or dramatic outbursts, but by small, significant shifts. She started by opening up to a trusted teacher in her English class, who listened without judgment to her struggles. She rejoined the theater group, not for the applause, but to remind herself that art was a way of telling truths that needed to be heard. Each step was painful, each moment of doubt a reminder of the battles she had already fought. Yet every small victory, every kind word from a classmate, every memory of Mama Ruth's strength helped her stitch the broken pieces of her self-image together. Late one afternoon, as the rain tapped gently on her window, Imani sat by her desk with her journal open. She wrote, "I am more than the whispers and the silence. I am the voice of my own destiny." In that quiet reaffirmation, she chose to redefine herself, not as the girl who had been cast aside, but as a beacon of resilience. Each stroke of her pen was an act of reclaiming her story, a quiet declaration that she would stand tall, even when the world preferred to look away. By nightfall, when the school's corridors had long been emptied of the day's judgments, Imani emerged once again into the space of her home with a tentative smile. That day had been fraught with internal battles, but she carried within her the seed of transformation. With every reflective moment and every dialogue of love in her ear, from Layla, from Mama Ruth, from the echo of past heroes, Imani began to piece together a vision of herself that was not defined by isolation, but by the strength to shine, in her own way. And so, as she closed her journal and glanced one last time at her reflection in the mirror, a mirror that now served as a testament to her resilience, Imani understood that the journey toward self-worth was a long, winding road, one in which pain and hope would walk side by side. And in that quiet, determined moment, she vowed that no matter how many times the world tried to diminish her light, she would continue to claim every bit of the crown that was always meant for her. The cold of the hallway no longer frightened her. It had become something familiar, a silence she had learned to live with. But beneath that quiet, something new had started to stir. Imani still carried the weight of everything: humiliation, doubt, loneliness, but now it burned a little differently. It was no longer just pain. It was purpose. It began with a conversation that wasn't meant to change anything. After a quiet week of skipped rehearsals and withdrawn participation, Imani finally returned to the school auditorium. The theater had always been her safe space, a place where her voice carried and her presence mattered. But lately, even that space had felt foreign. She walked in with hesitation, expecting indifference. What she didn't expect was the woman standing at the center of the room, Ms. Jordan. Tall, regal, unapologetically herself, she introduced herself as the new drama teacher with a calm confidence that immediately shifted the room. She was black, like Imani, but not the kind of black that folded itself to make others comfortable. She spoke with intention, moved with certainty, and when she looked at Imani, it was with something more than acknowledgement. It was recognition. After rehearsal ended, Ms. Jordan called out softly. "You have presence," she said, watching Imani from across the rows of seats. "But your eyes are somewhere else." Imani paused, unsure how to respond. She had grown used to hiding what she felt. "You ever played Harriet Tubman?" Ms. Jordan asked, flipping through the rehearsal notes. "No," Imani answered. Ms. Jordan didn't look surprised. You will. We're doing a showcase and I want you in the lead. Imani blinked, the offer landing like a lifeline she didn't know she needed. I'm not sure I'm ready, she said quietly. Ms. Jordan's eyes softened, but her voice remained firm. Harriet didn't wait to be ready. She walked forward anyway. Sometimes that's all you can do. Walk forward. Rehearsals began that same week. Imani read the script carefully, line by line. The words on the page were more than history. They were echoes of a struggle that stretched across generations. As she memorized Harriet's speeches, something inside her began to shift. She found strength in the cadence, in the conviction of someone who refused to let fear have the final say. One afternoon, as she stood alone on stage during practice, delivering a passage about liberation and sacrifice, her voice cracked, but not from nerves, from truth. It was as if the words weren't just being recited. They were being claimed. When rehearsal ended, Ms. Jordan approached her, her voice soft. You don't need a crown to command the stage, she said. But maybe it's time they saw you wear one. The words wrapped themselves around Imani's spirit. That night she sat at her desk, stared at the bare wall where her torn campaign posters used to hang, and picked up her notebook again. She didn't know what she would write, but her hand moved anyway. The next morning, a new post appeared on social media, a simple photo of Imani during rehearsal, her fist raised, her expression fierce. The caption read, "Let every voice be seen." Emma, a quiet white classmate from English class, saw the post first. She shared it to her story with the hashtag #AskCrownImani. Carlos, a Latino student Imani had worked with in a science project, followed suit. Then more students began sharing one by one. It was slow at first, quiet, but it grew. Within a week, the halls of Willowdale began to change. Posters reappeared, not from Imani, but from classmates who believed in her. Some hand-drawn, others printed. Her image alongside quotes from the play. Phrases like "strength in silence," "rise anyway," and "she's the queen we've been waiting for," popped up in lockers, backpacks, and windows. For the first time, Imani wasn't alone, but support always has a cost. Chloe's circle noticed the movement immediately. They began ridiculing the campaign online, posting memes mocking Imani's hair, her voice, even the quotes pulled from rehearsal. A few of Imani's new posters were torn down again. Others scribbled on with words like "try hard" and "pity." Vote. In the cafeteria, Chloe laughed loudly with her friends as they watched Imani walk past. "It's cute," Chloe said, just loud enough. "She really thinks this is about justice. It's prom, not a protest." Imani heard it. Everyone did. But she didn't stop walking. That same afternoon, the school's digital boards lit up with Chloe's new campaign video. High-definition footage of Chloe walking through the school, shaking hands, laughing with teachers, and ending with a slow-motion shot of her placing a tiara on her head. The message was clear, polished, perfect. And then came the call. Imani was summoned to the principal's office during second period. She sat across from Principal Hartwell, who adjusted his tie and spoke in measured tones. "We've had some complaints," he began. "Concerns that this campaign is becoming divisive, that some students feel uncomfortable." Imani stared, trying to keep her breath steady. "Your posters, your messages, they're beginning to feel political. This isn't the right platform for that kind of dialogue." She blinked. "I'm running for prom queen. I didn't know. My existence was political." The principal sighed. "Imani, no one is questioning your right to run. But there's a way to do things without causing disruption." Imani stood slowly, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm not the one causing disruption. I'm just no longer shrinking to keep others comfortable." The principal didn't respond. Imani walked out of the office with her back straight, her chest tight, and her eyes forward. She didn't stop at her locker. She didn't pause to look at the stairs she felt crawling across her back. She went home that evening with a full heart and a quiet storm building inside her. Her mother met her at the door, concern etched on her face. Imani dropped her bag on the couch and said with calm certainty, "I'm running again." Her mom didn't ask why. She only nodded. Imani looked her in the eye. "But this time, it's not just for me." That night, Imani reopened her campaign notebook. She had thought she was done with it, another symbol of everything torn down. But now it felt like a map she hadn't finished drawing. On a fresh page, she scribbled 3 words: voice, truth, legacy. The next day, she returned to school with a different kind of energy. It wasn't loud, it wasn't showy, but it was solid. Students looked at her differently. Not all, but some. A few nodded. Others smiled briefly. Most still avoided her eyes. But it didn't matter. Imani had finally stopped waiting for permission. During lunch, Carlos approached her table with Emma trailing behind. "We want to organize something," he said. "Not a protest, something visual, something quiet but clear." Imani raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "A walk-in," Emma said. "We all wear black, we walk in together, and we post your quote. Let every voice be seen. Not loud, just presence." Imani blinked. The idea stunned her, not because it was big, but because someone else was thinking of her voice as worth following. She nodded slowly. "Let's do it." By Friday, word had spread, not just in whispers, but in subtle signals. Students texting. The hashtag, wearing black shirts under their hoodies, planning where to meet before school started. That morning, nearly 40 students showed up in black. Not just black students, Latinos, Asians. White kids who had never spoken to Imani before. Teachers noticed. Some frowned. A few smiled. They didn't chant. They didn't shout. They just walked into school together, silent and calm, holding their heads high. At the front of the line was Imani. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Later that day, Ms. Jordan pulled her aside. "I've been teaching for 15 years, she said. "And I've never seen someone shift the room without saying a single word." Imani smiled faintly. "I'm just tired of being invisible." "You were never invisible," Ms. Jordan said. "They just weren't ready to see." By the following week, Chloe's campaign looked even shinier. More posters, balloons. A photo op with a local news outlet doing a piece on school spirit. The article barely mentioned the other candidates. It certainly didn't mention Imani. But she noticed something different in the halls. Students whispered less. A few walked with her to class. Someone slid a folded note into her locker with 3 words, "You inspire me." In 3rd period history, her teacher asked about the civil rights movement. No one raised their hand. Imani did. She didn't speak with anger, she spoke with memory. Her own, her grandmother's. The weight of being taught not to take up too much space. The pressure to smile when you want to scream. When she finished, the class was silent, not with awkwardness, but with respect. After school, Layla found her outside the auditorium. "I should have said something sooner," she said. "I didn't want to make things worse for you." Imani nodded slowly. "You still didn't vote." "I was scared." "I was too," Imani said. "But scared or not, I'm still here." Layla hugged her. "I'll be better, I promise." Later that week, Ms. Jordan handed her a script for a solo piece. "This one's yours to write," she said. "It doesn't have to be long, but it has to be true." Imani stayed up late writing. She didn't try to be poetic. She didn't try to impress. She wrote about the hallway where her posters were torn, the office where her voice was questioned, the mirror that once made her ashamed of her hair, and the moment she decided to run again. At the Black History Showcase, she stood center stage under a single spotlight and read her piece. "I used to think strength looked like silence," she began. "But now I know it looks like standing, when no one claps, speaking when no one listens, running when the track was never meant for you." The audience didn't move, and then they rose. A standing ovation, not for perfection, but for truth. Imani left the stage with tears in her eyes, not because she was sad, but because she had finally been seen. That night, she sat with her mom on the couch. "Win or lose," her mother said, brushing a curl from her daughter's face. You already showed them what royalty looks like. Imani leaned her head on her mother's shoulder and whispered, "Now they can't unsee it." The following Monday, the school buzzed with something different. Not tension. Not silence. Curiosity. Students who once rolled their eyes now looked at Imani with something closer to recognition. A few teachers nodded when she entered their classrooms. One even stopped her after class and said, "I hope you know how powerful you are." But the moment that sealed it came from someone she never expected. In the library, between third and fourth period, Chloe approached her. Imani braced herself. Chloe didn't speak right away. She held a piece of paper in her hand, a printout of the school's prom ballot. "I saw your performance," Chloe said, her voice quiet. Imani waited. "You were good." Imani met her eyes. "That's not why I did it." Chloe looked down. "I know. There was no apology." Not exactly. But something in Chloe's expression had changed. A crack in the perfect mask. After she walked away, Imani stood still, the moment settling over her like a breeze. She didn't need Chloe's approval. She didn't need the crown. She had already earned what mattered most. That evening, she stood by her bedroom window, notebook in hand. She looked out over the quiet neighborhood, the trees swaying gently in the spring air. She wrote a single sentence. "Sometimes, the crown isn't gold. Sometimes, it's knowing you refuse to shrink." When she closed the notebook, she smiled. Not for the campaign, not for the performance, not even for the applause. She smiled because she had become who she was always meant to be. Whole, seen, unshaken. Prom night arrived like thunder. Quiet at first, then all-consuming. Imani stood in front of her mirror one last time, her reflection wrapped in fabric that shimmered with stories. Her dress wasn't bought from any boutique. It was custom-made by her aunt, sewn from deep blue and golden fabric inspired by African royalty. Bold, regal, unapologetically hers. Gold threads danced across her sleeves like sunlight catching memory, and her curls, left wild and untouched, were adorned with golden beads and a single shining comb that once belonged to Mama Ruth. When Sanctuaries, she stepped out of the car at the school gym. The world paused. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. A slow wave of whispers spread like ripples in water. Cameras flashed, gasps filled the air. No one had expected her to show up, much less like this. But Imani didn't flinch. She walked into the gym with a quiet fire in her eyes, every step. An act of resistance, every breath a refusal to shrink. She was no longer asking to be seen. She was declaring it. Inside, the gym had been transformed with soft lighting, flowing curtains, and a stage lit with golden hues. Chloe's campaign had spared no expense. Her posters hung with precision. Her friends wore matching corsages. And, at the center of it all stood Chloe herself, flawless in a glittering silver gown, already posing near the throne chair like she had been crowned in advance. Imani's entrance didn't go unnoticed. Chloe's eyes followed her across the room. There was no smile, just a flicker of tension. Imani found her friends, Carlos, Emma, Layla, and joined them in a quiet corner. They hugged her tightly, their faces lit with pride. "You're already the moment," Carlos whispered. "No matter what happens." But what happened next would change everything. Just before the official announcement, a buzz swept through the crowd. Phones lit up. A flurry of messages, screenshots, and whispers began to spread. A student named Jordan from the AV club had posted a thread exposing something no one expected. Screenshots of emails and vote logs, messages showing that Chloe's team had accessed the voting system and tampered with the results. The evidence was clear. Chloe hadn't won fairly. Jordan's post ended with a simple caption, "We deserve better." Crown Imani. Within minutes, the room changed. Murmurs turned into waves of outrage. Teachers scrambled to confirm the news. Principal Hartwell tried to contain it, calling over staff, asking for phones to be put away. But the truth had already left the building. It was in their hands, in their hearts. Still, the ceremony continued. An administrator stepped onto the stage, visibly flustered, and read the announcement as if nothing had happened. And your 2024 prom queen is Chloe Hartwell. The room did not erupt into cheers. It stalled. Then, a sound. A single boo from the back of the gym. Another. Then a wave. Students began to clap, not for Chloe, but for Imani. One by one, the chants rose, low at first, then louder. Imani! 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 Chloe stood frozen on stage, her smile faltering. She clutched her gown, staring at the crowd in disbelief. The crown in the administrator's hand trembled. He hesitated, and then Ms. Jordan walked calmly onto the stage. She didn't take the mic. She didn't ask for permission. She simply stepped forward, took the crown from the administrator's hands, and turned toward Imani. Sometimes, she said, voice steady and strong, we don't wait for permission to be honored. Imani didn't move at first. The moment felt too big. Her heart pounded, her breath caught. Then she walked forward, not in a rush, not with fear, but with grace. She climbed the steps, and Ms. Jordan placed the crown gently on her head. The gym erupted, not in chaos, but in applause. Real, raw, unfiltered applause. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held them back. Ms. Jordan stepped aside, and a mic was handed to her. Imani looked out over the crowd, some cheering, some still stunned, others holding their breath. She waited for the noise to settle. Then she spoke. I didn't come here tonight to win a title, she began, her voice strong. I came to remind you that we've always been queens, even when they told us we weren't, even when they erased our names, tore down our images, and mocked our voices. A hush fell over the room. You could hear the flicker of lights and the quiet breaths of students leaning closer. I came because I'm not just one girl in a dress. I'm every girl who was told she wasn't enough. Every girl who sat at the edge of the photo. Every girl who had to straighten her curls to be heard. I came to tell you, your story matters. She paused. Whether I wear this crown or not, tomorrow I'm still going to walk like I do. Applause again. Not all joined in, but many did. Enough to shake the walls of that old gym. Would you like me to continue with the next part and complete the remaining 100 words to reach the full 2,000-word scene? The applause still echoed in Imani's ears long after prom night had ended. The crown she wore that night now rested on her bookshelf, not because it defined her, but because it reminded her of everything she had claimed without anyone's permission. The days that followed moved slower, lighter, but they were not without weight. On Monday morning, the school felt different. The hallways that once whispered with judgment now buzzed with cautious curiosity. Students approached her, some with hugs, some with nods, others just with quiet thanks. Imani didn't need the spotlight anymore. She had become the light. Within a week, the school board made an announcement. A new Diversity and Equity Council would be formed, led by none other than Ms. Jordan, the same woman who refused to wait for justice to be granted. She had turned a performance space into a place of transformation, and now she was bringing that same fire to the administration. Imani was invited to speak at the first assembly organized by the new council. She wore a simple blazer and a gold necklace Mama Ruth had given her. Her voice didn't tremble this time. She spoke with the same grace that carried her on prom night. Change doesn't start when we're ready, she said. It starts when we stop asking for permission to exist. New policies followed, more inclusive curriculum in history, classes, cultural heritage celebrations, and student-led forums. Imani's speech from prom night was printed in the school paper and later featured in the local news. A journalist interviewed her for a piece titled, "The Girl Who Wore Her Crown Before It Was Given." And then came the letter, a thick envelope, marked in bold with Howard University. She held it in her hands for what felt like hours, heart pounding. When she tore it open, tears streamed before she even finished reading. She was in. Full scholarship. Her dream wasn't just a possibility anymore, it was real. That same week she launched a blog. She called it Crowned Anyway. It wasn't just a title, it was a declaration. She wrote about what it meant to lead without a title, to heal in public, to speak when silence was expected. Her posts were raw, honest, and filled with lessons she wished someone had told her sooner. Her second blog entry began with, "Don't wait for the world to see your worth. Build it into your walk." The blog went viral. Girls across the country messaged her. Some from schools like Willowdale, others from places even more hidden. "You gave me courage," one wrote. "I thought I was alone," said another. She wasn't alone anymore. One sunny Thursday, Imani returned to her old elementary school. The halls looked smaller now, the desks tinier, the world less intimidating. But when she walked into Mrs. Thompson's third-grade classroom, she saw the same wide-eyed wonder she once carried. The girls gathered around her, full of questions and awe. "Were you scared?" one asked. "Did they really boo the other girl?" another whispered. Imani smiled, kneeling so she was eye level with them. "I was scared," she said, "and people weren't always kind. But you don't have to change yourself to be worthy. You hear me? Never dim your shine to fit a broken mirror." They stared, quiet for a moment. Then one girl raised her hand, her voice soft. "Can I be a queen too?" Imani reached out and tapped her crownless head. "You already are." That night, back at home, Mama Ruth sat in her favorite chair with a tissue clutched in one hand and the remote in the other. She played the video of Imani's prom speech again, lips moving along with every word. When the speech ended, she wiped a tear from her cheek and whispered, "That's my baby." Imani stood in the hallway, watching. Her chest swelled with something deeper than pride, something sacred. Her mother walked in behind her and wrapped an arm around her shoulder. "You changed something," she said. Imani leaned into her. "So did you. So did Mama Ruth. So did every woman who came before me." And she meant it, because the crown on her shelf wasn't made of metal. It was made of every time she didn't give up, every time she stood when silence felt safer, every time she refused to be erased. They had given her a crown, but she'd already become a queen long before they noticed.